Everybody, thank you for joining me at Dunrovin Ranch in lovely Lola, Montana. It's chilly, it's overcast. Oh, I don't know, 55 or something like that. At least that's what it feels like. I'm here. She's out of the shop, but Jewel is visiting with me today. This is Fur and Feathers, the program during which I usually talk to a member on the phone and we show the members pets or wild birds, bird feeders, bird baths, things like that. Today, I decided that I will be my own guest. And a couple things, different things I'm going to talk about. One is a surprise that I am extremely excited about, and I hope you'll be excited about it. If it falls dead flat, then then I know. But if you're excited, let me know you're excited, because I would like your input, your help, your participation from this moment forward. Also, I'm going to talk about my trip to Mongolia, which was 9 years ago, something like that, 10 years ago, and it changed everything. I think I've told you before that I went to Mongolia because of Doc, and I'm here because of Mongolia. So I'll fill you in all that. It all ties together. Please, any questions, comments, please put them in the chat and Jake will whisper them in my ear right here. So the big news is that I am going on a road trip in January with Crow. I asked Suzanne if I could borrow the ranch rig, the black truck and the 2-horse trailer. I said what I would like to do is I would like to take a trip, go horse camping. I've never gone horse camping, and it's something I really want to do. I've wanted to do it for a few years now. And Crow is definitely the horse for that, and we'll talk about getting him ready, and I need your help with that as well. And I said, Suzanne, what I'd like to do is in exchange for using the rig, I'd like to have the members participate in the trip. I don't know the tech involved, but it would be great if you could follow me, if I had some kind of GPS on my phone, and you could follow me on our website, behind the paywall, of course, because I don't want strangers knowing where I am, of course. If you're anywhere near my path, I'm happy to come visit you. Maybe you can come meet me. We can talk along the way. I'll get on the chat every day. Maybe I could mic up with one of you here and there. So that's the big news. I'm really excited about it. It will be challenging. It will be enlightening. It will be a lot of fun. It will be stressful. And I hope not scary, too scary. So the plan for the road trip is, my number one criteria is warm. So the first thing I'm doing is heading to the southwest. Now, I am from Los Angeles, California, and my favorite area in Southern California is the desert. And as far as the deserts go, my favorite desert is Joshua Tree National Park. I feel very at home there. I just love it. There's I guess it's a B&B. It's called the Inn at 29 Palms, and it's right on the edge of the desert, and they have individual bungalows and an actual oasis and a wonderful restaurant. It's wonderful. I went there every year for 3 or 4 years on my birthday. So that's going to be my first stop. I've always wanted to ride a horse in Joshua Tree, and they have an equestrian campground at Black Rock Campground, it's called. I've made my reservation already for 4 nights there. So that's what the trip is centering around, is Joshua Tree. I've discovered a website called roadtrippers.com. It's incredible. It helps me plot my trip. It tells me the number of miles between, how long it should take between stops. I can apply filters, campgrounds, historical monuments, that's interesting roadside attractions, which I love. I can even hit some places on Route 66, which has been a dream of mine to drive Route 66. So far, the big stop is I'm leaving. Well, my reservation at Joshua Tree is January 7 through 11. I can probably play with that a little bit. So that's my first stop, is January 7th in Joshua Tree. Grand Canyon, South Rim, weather permitting. There's actually a couple horse corrals there. I can reserve a horse corral, and I can camp near the Grand Canyon. You can take your personal horses along the rim, not inside, but on the rim. I have a friend outside of Tucson, and there is some BLM land there that you can stay on for up to 15 days. I think that sounds nice. Something I'm exploring is BLM land, which apparently you can just camp on at no charge. When I'm in the Tucson area, I'm very excited to announce that I'm going to the OK Corral with my horse. And they have a reenactment of the shootout, and you can take your pictures with the characters all dressed in their garb, and I swear that we're going to get a picture of Crow with Wyatt Earp. Mark my words, we're doing that. I also would like to hit Big Bend National Park, and that's southwest Texas on the Mexican border. I'm very excited. I hear it's amazing. In between, I have various stops I can make. I'm looking into various ranches that can put me up for the night, various campgrounds, again, weather permitting. I basically have to get south as quickly as I can. Another consideration is I can't drive at night. I can't see at all at night. It's gotten to that point. So I'll have to plan my driving, sunrise to sunset. Most of the stops I've figured out so far, and they will change. Most of the stops I've figured out so far are between 2 and 5 hours, which I think is pretty good. I'm working on I'm going to try to get to Oklahoma, Missouri. I know that there's a few members in that area, and perhaps we can all meet someplace, in that area. And then I probably will come back through Colorado. I don't know. I have to really think about weather it's January after all. So one thing is, if any of you, and this is members only, this isn't Facebook members, this is our website members only. If any of you live anywhere near my route, which is Montana, Idaho, Utah, New Mexico, Texas, and then up through the corner of Oklahoma. If any of you are near there, let me know, and we'll talk about setting up a meeting. I think that would be fantastic. So as far as my preparations for the trip, by the way, I've never camped before. Did I neglect to mention that? Well, that's not true. I've gone camping once. It was in Mongolia, and the outfitter there set up our tents for us and cooked for us. A lot of mutton. We had mutton 3 to 4 times a day. And Nescafe, which is brilliant when you need coffee and you're in the middle of nowhere. So as far as camping goes, I'm going to pick Suzanne's brain, hopefully maybe on camera. Everyone who comes through here who's been camping, I pick their brain. James and Katie. Kate, who will live here over the winter, do a lot of camping. And I found lots of websites. Boy, you can find out anything these days. Camping, horse camping. I will not be using a tent. I'll probably take a tent for an emergency, but the tack room of the 2-horse trailer is huge. Suzanne said that she bought the trailer and it had been customized. So the tack room is massive for a tack room, and they had it set up to sleep in. So there's not a whole lot I have to do. Heat will be important. They do have indoor propane heaters, which I bought the piece for, and I'm going to experiment with that. Yes, I'll be very careful, and I will have ventilation. Cooking, I don't have to have a small backpack-sized stove because I can carry quite a bit of stuff. So I have to decide how elaborate I want my cooking to be. My water storage, I'm working on that. I'll take the trailer in to get checked out, take the truck in to get checked out, and then there's camping with the horse. So that is why Crow spent the night in a stall, and why he was a little anxious about it. He's got to learn to be alone, and he has to learn to stay anywhere. He has to learn to sleep overnight tied up, for example. And I'm looking into various options for that, including something called a neck rope. He has to learn to get in and out of that trailer without giving me any trouble at all. He has to learn to haul long distances, which I bet he probably has, being an outfitter's horse. Suzanne had a great point. He has to learn, if a rope gets under his tail, Suzanne's talked about this before, that can really freak a horse out unless they're used to it. So I'll probably, get him used to a crupper and ride him around with that. What else? Temperature. Making sure the horse doesn't get too hot or too cold in the trailer. Something that occurred to me yesterday is that he's growing a winter coat now. Actually, he's getting a good winter coat. And something I have to look into is the white hair is much thicker than the dark brown hair. Maybe that comes in later. I hope it comes in later. So he's going to be nice and haired up in January, but when we're riding in the desert and it's 70 or 80 degrees in the day, that's not going to be good. I have to think about what to do. Do I blanket him now and try to slow down his hair growth? Maybe not. Do I let him hair up? Then do I body clip him and blanket him and take him down? Body clipping is when you shave the hair off. I have to think about this. I think what I'm probably going to do is let him grow his coat and then see what happens at that end. That's probably the best thing, because we do have a lot of cold to get to before I leave and a lot of cold when I get back. Electrolytes, I have to worry about that. His nutrition. What you cannot do in national parks and a lot of places is feed loose hay. I think it's because it has weed seeds. I also think it's because it makes a heck of a mess. So I'm going to be traveling with grass cubes and probably alfalfa orchard or alfalfa Timothy, and I will be transitioning him over to those in the next. I have a couple months before I really have to start prepping him as far as eating goes. I'm going to see if I can leave the 2-horse hooked up so I can take him for short drives, take him for little trips, day trips, maybe even spend a couple nights somewhere nearby with him before it gets too cold. I'm not a cold person. I don't enjoy the cold that much. So I'll be hopefully, just walking around with him. He doesn't like things being dragged around him. We noticed that. So I'll be working with that. I'm going to have to work to desensitize him to everything. You saw yesterday he's not a fan of water. He has a little something on his chest and on the top of his rump, so I'm putting some medicated shampoo on him and some topical antibacterial, antifungal, and he's got to get used to everything. So we've got to start, I've got to start just doing everything with him. So what I need your help for, one, I need you to watch and give me thoughts and comments. And two, if I have him tied up in the arena overnight, for example, I need you to let me know how it goes. If you have any campgrounds you know of, I bet you do, let me know about that. Let me know if this interests you at all. You'll be able to track my movements all January and talk to me daily, and I can let you know how it goes. I'll be sending lots of pictures back that I'll put on the chat, or maybe we should do, maybe Fur and Feathers 2 or 3 of the weeks of January should be pictures of my trip. Maybe we should have a designated program for my trip. Let me know what your thoughts would be. It's exciting. It's really exciting. I'm getting the trailer ready now because I don't want to do it when it's really cold. So my plan is to have it all ready, all decked out, all safe and secure. So I just load Crow up and we go. So I don't have to do any other prep. So, you know, best laid plans, but that's my plan. So I've never horse camped before. Well, I've horse camped once. It was in Mongolia, which is not the same as driving your own rig around and feeding yourself. I will be staying on highways, on interstates as much as possible. Safety reasons. And, you know, truck stops are awesome. Truckers are also awesome if I need help. And I'm a woman traveling alone. So I am mindful of just general safety concerns as far as that goes. So Mongolia. So I thought I would tell you about Mongolia. I went to Mongolia 10 years or so ago because I wanted to go take a horse trip in a culture that was still predominantly based around horses. And Mongolia and Iceland were my choices. I chose Mongolia. It was completely like people who, not guests, there were 10 guests, turned out to be women all from all over the world. But to spend time and to have nonverbal conversations with Mongolian horsemen people are different all over the world. I've traveled quite a bit. And to be able to spend time with people who, for centuries upon centuries, have lived the way they currently live and have the relationship with their animals the way they've had them forever, was remarkable. And it was almost by osmosis that when I left after 2 weeks and returned to Los Angeles, I experienced tremendous culture shock. I had kind of adapted so quickly to Mongolia and the countryside that Los Angeles just overwhelmed me. And I've told you before that what I did was find a place just north of Los Angeles where I rented a little mother-in-law apartment and I had a dock in the yard. And even that became too much, so that's when I quit my career as a teacher and gave my stuff away and loaded up Arrow and sent Doc to Colorado, and I've been doing these jobs ever since. Just for that reason that I went to Mongolia and I had to live with Doc, so that's why I'm here. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about Mongolia, and I don't know what to tell you except by way of a few stories. First of all, Mongolia is, weird things happen. And I spoke to a friend of Suzanne's a month or so ago who had been to Mongolia, and weird things happen, which I will try to explain. First of all, at the time, there was one main city, the capital, Ulaanbaatar, and it was basically lots of old Soviet architecture, because it was under Soviet rule for quite some time. And then when that rule came to an end, the Russians, the Soviets, excuse my lack of historical knowledge, they decimated the temples. They destroyed so much precious religious, so many artifacts, so many tapestries. The temples themselves were destroyed. So we started in Ulaanbaatar, and the first night we were in, I forget the hotel, but there was suddenly car sirens, middle of the night, started going off like crazy. So, you know, being in that part of the world, we thought that they were police sirens. We didn't know what was going on. So we hit the floor, hid under beds. Turns out that there was an election that had happened, and the opposition had started somewhat of a small revolution while we were there, and that's just how the trip started. Everything, we're fine, obviously. Everything was fine, but it was terrifying. when you're in a place where you don't speak the language, and terrifying and exhilarating. Where you don't speak the language, you don't know the culture, you don't know what's going on. So it started out with thinking we were under attack. And it became more amusing as we went along. We rode in big Soviet trucks, 8, 9, 10 hours, out into the middle of nowhere. We saw, in the middle of nowhere, I mean, I can't tell you enough how beautiful it is. Actually, I do have, I brought some things to show you as well. And I do have a painting that shows you a little bit about what it was like. So here's the painting I got. I picked it up for $8 behind a temple. So that's, if you can imagine that the ground is greener than you can imagine, the sky is bluer than you can imagine, and not only is the ground green, and I can't even, there's no words for the green, but it's wild thyme, it's not grass. So as you galloped across the countryside, racing your horseman, as I tended to do, he let me win, by the way, you smell thyme as you gallop. It's unbelievable. So we drove for a long time, and we stopped, and we waited. A couple hours later, come trotting up 4 Mongolian horsemen in the full-on dell. It's called a dell. It's a long cloakish thing with a belt. They're very colorful. They came up each on a horse, and each with a couple horses next to them. And I was to learn that those were the horses we'd be riding. So my guy, and it's a long story, and I'll get to the point where he could have been my husband, but that's for a few minutes from now. His name was PI1A, and he was hilarious. So he assigned me a horse. The horse I rode, the horses in Mongolia don't have names because they are almost currency. They're not pets. But I decided before I left that I was going to name my horse, and my horse was going to be Seabiscuit. So I have a photograph of Seabiscuit, and that's him. He's awesome. They're small. They are sturdy. They are steady. They're not affectionate. We weren't supposed to pet them, in fact, but we did at the end, of course. That's my horse. I rode him for 2 weeks. So PI1A assigned me Seabiscuit, and we would ride 6, 7, 8 hours a day. The trucks would go on ahead. We'd arrive at the campsite, and by the way, everything I say is in quotes. And the tents would be set up. They'd be cooking the mutton and the potatoes, and we would eat. Well, we would sit around and chat. And then we would sleep, and the next day we would go on and do it again. And there was nothing in between campsites, nothing, which was remarkable. Nothing man-made for days. What we did do is stop at the random ger that we encountered. Now the ger is what they call a yurt. They're all the same inside. There are rules for entering, for sitting. The horsemen, obviously, they sometimes knew the people we stopped at, sometimes they didn't. But being a nomadic culture, you welcome anyone in because people need sustenance as they travel, and the generosity was incredible. So a couple times we would go in. We would be offered erek, which is fermented mare's milk. It's slightly alcoholic. It is horse milk, and you get used to it pretty quick. when you're thirsty and when it's slightly alcoholic and you're in Mongolia and it's tradition. They offered us a lot of yak butter, which again, when you're hungry in Mongolia, you eat it. Something that was interesting is that the men in the gers were always laughing and joking and very upbeat, probably drunk. Everyone in Mongolia is drunk, except the women. The women were so tired. They looked so much older than their years. They didn't smile. They didn't interact at all. They just kept the stove in the middle of the ger burning and offered us our butter. A couple of the best with the locals, as it were, which sounds is when I didn't go on the ride, but when I traveled in the truck. The truck would stop at gers when the people on horseback did not. A couple interesting things. 3 interesting things happened when I didn't ride, but I was in the truck. We were asked to bring gifts for the kids should we encounter any, and pencils and paper and really what were requested. Well, I brought stickers, little stickers with horses on them. I brought a pin the tail of the donkey game. And I brought pencils and crayons as well. The pin the tail of the donkey game comes back. Out from a ger. And by the way, it's like this. It's like a painting. Again, greener than you can imagine. But imagine miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, as far as you can see, and there's nothing, but you come a ger. Boy, he was probably 13 or 14. And it was clear that he was mentally challenged. And he came out, and I said hi and greeted him, and I waved him over to me, and I showed him the stickers. Can you imagine? We've never seen a sticker before. I don't know that he's seen paper before. So I took a sticker, and I put it on his hand. And can you imagine what his mind was doing? But he stared, he looked at his mom, he stared, he looked at his mom, and then he smiled, and he did this and it wouldn't come off, and he just looked at me and beamed, and I gave him another one, and his mind was blown, but the smile on his face, I will never, ever forget the smile on his face. I gave him a sheet of the stickers. We went in. Being a woman, I walked to the right, the men walked to the left. We had our air egg and our butter, and we went on our way. Remarkable. Another story that happened while I didn't ride but was in the truck is we encountered a baby horse, a foal. Oh, did I mention the wild horses everywhere? But I digress. We came across a foal, very young, maybe a few days old, maybe a few weeks old. And I think it was a filly. She was not well. She was dying. She was on her feet, but she was dying. And her mom, her mare was nowhere to be found. So these guys, who, by the way, they act so tough, and they don't treat their horses like we do. And what they did was they stopped, and one of them picked up the foal, put it in the front of the truck with us, and we drove for hours and hours until we encountered another ger. And those folks came out, and there was conversations, and then the girl who lived in that ger, It was now her horse, and they took it inside the gare to try to nurse it back to health. It was incredible. My third story of not going on the ride was encountering another gare. This is like 3 days I didn't ride, I think 4 days. Went inside and sat down. Everyone's, they didn't actually talk that much. Even the people who could speak the language, my horseman didn't talk much, and the driver didn't talk much. There was a goat in bed. That was interesting. A sick goat, but I mean, imagine if it gets to 40 below sometimes in their winter. And the horses survive, the animals out there survive, but they bring their little animals inside, which is, I think, is great. And they care for them beautifully. And that was cool. So Bayrak, I raced him a lot. I was with people who kind of didn't have the same spirit I did, as, with the same win in Rome spirit. And I thought, I'm on these little horses, let's go. So I would race Bayrak a lot. He let me win. But if you can imagine cowboying it across the Mongolian countryside, it was pretty remarkable. So he learned I was a teacher, and he wanted to learn English. So I would hear him cantering up behind me, galloping up behind me. I'd go, oh no, here he comes. And he'd say, Kelly, Kelly. Yes, Bayrak. In English, horse. No, he'd say, in English, and he'd point to the horse. I'd say, horse. And he'd say, mare. Mongoli, mare. Okay. So we did that for days and days and days. And I cannot tell you how annoyed I became with Bayrak for wanting to learn English all the time. At the time, I thought, Kelly, you're in Mongolia. The guy wants to learn English. A Mongolian horseman wants to, I mean, come on. You can't be annoyed by this. But he was annoying. He also drank a tremendous amount and sang a lot, which was, he could do the Mongolian throat singing, which I encourage you to go to YouTube and put in Mongolian throat singing. It's when you can do several octaves at one time. He was good at it. He was very good at it. One day, the 3 other horsemen were snickering. They would look at me and snicker. And I thought, oh God, now what? Well, someone told me, the guide who could speak English, her name was Tume. She said that Bayrak was going to propose to me, that I was to be his second wife, and that I would live with them and I would teach him English. And as flattered as I was, no. No, that would not happen. And he was a little crushed, I have to say. It's funny because he wrote me a note with a phone number on it, and I have no idea whose phone number was or who had a phone or where I was supposed to be calling. But I still have it, by the way. A couple weird things that happened. And, in Mongolia, weird things happened. We were sitting around one afternoon, late evening. Our tents, 3 or 4 tents were set up. The food truck was there, fire going. And out of nowhere, in Mongolia, things happen out of nowhere. This older man, his mother, I think, and a young boy just showed up. They had a car battery, an old keyboard, and what else? Did they have a horse and fiddle? That may have been all. But they show up out of nowhere, carrying this stuff. And again, look at the painting. That's where we are. So he sets down his car battery, hooks it to his keyboard, and starts singing. Our translator told us that he was singing the songs he'd written, and he was apparently well known. And his songs were all about Genghis Khan, who, by the way, heroic. We've been taught he's a brutal, horrible human dictator, slaughterer of millions, but he's a hero. And in Mongolia, he's Chinggis. Chinggis is hated. So he starts playing the keyboard, hooked up to the car battery in the middle of nowhere, and starts singing his song. And the chorus was, of course, Chinggis, 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 Chinggis. You think about it, it's the sound of galloping horses as well, which is very cool. He finished his own songs, and then he hit a button on the keyboard, and a Viennese waltz starts playing. Okay? So people start getting up because, of course, the air egg has now kicked in. People start getting up, and they're dancing with each other. They're dancing to a Viennese waltz, played by a keyboard, hooked to a car battery, in the middle of nowhere, Mongolia. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. Another great thing that happened, besides getting caught in the hailstorm and then baking to death and then freezing to death, the weather changes, and galloping with Bayrak, and incredible. Toward the end of the trip, the last day, we went back to the horsemen's gears, and they were pretty close to each other. And we were going to go back, and I wanted to gallop back, and they said, no. They were trying to explain to me that the horses were heading home. And much like here, you don't gallop your horses home, but I wanted to. So we're galloping back, and they're looking at me like, no, bad idea. But I did it anyway, and those horses are fast, I'm telling you. They're sturdy. You can gallop over rocks. They don't stumble. They're amazing. Well, my horse, for some reason, there was a piece of wood. Believe it or not, there was a piece of plywood, a right angle, a piece of plywood, which someone must have brought up there from one of the tours. And Seabiscuit saw it, and he shot sideways so fast, because how scary is that? And I came off, and my arm was numb for a few days, but everyone thought that was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. The laughter that came from the horsemen. I guess if they were concerned, I would have been concerned, but you pop back up and you keep going. So we're back at the gears of the horsemen, and much drinking is happening. And much drinking again. I have to say that again because that has a lot to do with the rest of the story. Couple cool things. One of the guys had an old Soviet motorcycle, which is what they used to get around, I guess, fairly locally. It was hours away from Ulaanbaatar. And I know how to ride a motorcycle. So I said, I want to ride a motorcycle. No. Women don't ride motorcycles in Mongolia. Well, that kind of spurred me on even more. And so I'm like, I'm riding a motorcycle. So I go and I get on the motorcycle. And they look a little concerned. Start it. It took forever to start it, of course. So I start the motorcycle, and I take off in a circle around the gears. And boy, did they think that was the greatest thing ever. So hopefully, you never know, maybe now women ride motorcycles in Mongolia. So drinking continues, and I bring out my pin the tail on the donkey game that I brought along with crayons and stickers. And I try to explain how to do it. We put the game on the side of the gear, the yurt, and we show them how to play it, which is obviously you give a person the tail, you spin them around, and you see if they can find the donkey. Ooh, look how it all comes back. Donkeys. Well, we did it a couple times, the tourists, and then the very drunk horsemen did it. And what I found really fascinating was they spun each other around, but they didn't wait for them to fail. They helped them find the right place for the tail, which I thought was amazing. How different, huh? Not competitive, just a game and let's win it. It's pretty great. So the very last night, I'm sitting with Barak. We're drinking. Oh, by the way, if you continue to ferment arag, milk, it becomes milk vodka. And after you have a little bit of it, it really doesn't matter what it tastes like anymore. So I'm sitting, I'll never forget this. Here's my tent. I'm sitting here, Barak's sitting here, and we're conversing without words. And he points to the mala, which is the Buddhist prayer beads. They all have them on their wrists. He pointed to that, and then he pointed to the sky, and he said, Tengri. And I knew that Tengri in Mongolia means God. And he goes, English, Tengri, English. I said, God. And he said, God, God. And we sat and we drank and we just sat and we had just had the most important conversation we could have together. We talked about peace. We talked about war. And we talked about God. It was remarkable. Never forget that guy. Hours back to Ulaanbaatar, a couple nights there, and through Beijing and back home. Remarkable trip. And it's because of Mongolia that I'm here with you all, and I couldn't be happier. I thought I would share some things with you that I picked up in Mongolia. Some of them I'm not supposed to have, I'm pretty sure. But they were being sold by a guy behind a temple. So one of the things I have is an altar. It's banged up a little bit, but it's made of terracotta underneath and hand hammered hinges. You can probably see a little bit. It depicts Buddha. Not so many years ago, I was watching something on PBS on Mongolian shamans, and one of them had the exact one. So I believe it's legit. Something else I have is this horse. I got that from someone. It's made of bone. It's also fully engraved on the bottom. So I don't know if it's a stamp. It's probably a chess piece of some kind. And then I have a manuscript. It's very, very old. It is covered in some kind of plastic that's flaking off. And it's intact. One piece I gave to an artist so she could incorporate it into her work. And what's very cool is it's wrapped in a very, very old dell. This beautiful orange on this side. There is some embroidery. It looks to be dragons or snakes. And this side has similar, actually, it's more of just a Buddhist patterns on it. I treasure this stuff. You've seen Seabiscuit and you've seen the painting. I also have some books. The official history of the Mongols is called The Secret History of the Mongols, and it's a prose poem. It's very difficult to read. Some language books, some books of folk tales. And then this is what's called, and I don't pronounce it properly at all, it's called a Morinkur. Morinkur, M-O-R-I-N space K-H-U-U-R. Please look that up on YouTube as well. It's a two-stringed instrument played with a bow with horsehair. And it's tuned, I think, B flat and F sharp, something like that. No, I cannot play it. I've made noise on it. And I would probably make noise on it now, but the bow is way too the bow is way too loose. And as bad as that sounds, it's kind of what it sounds like. So I have some CDs of the music I listen to sometimes. So again, I encourage you to look up Mongolian throat singing and Mournkur, Morinkhur. The story of this, the Mournkur, is Mournkur means horsehead fiddle. You can see the horsehead here. The story goes that a horseman had a very precious horse to him who died. And his grief was so great that he carved a fiddle with his horse's image up top, and that's how it became the Mongolian national instrument. And as much as they don't name their horses and they don't pet their horses, and the story that the national instrument is because someone so loved his horse, kind of puts that to rest. We were told at the end not to hug our horses goodbye, but we wanted to. We want to, and they thought it would spook them or it would freak them out. But you know I hugged Seabiscuit, and you know he didn't care. You know he probably liked it. So that's my camping trip. That's the one camping trip I've been on. Who knows what's going to happen on the January trip? I don't think it'll be as exotic, but hopefully it will be as transformative as this one was. Boy, I haven't really told these stories before, and it's, oh boy, I miss it. I think if I didn't have horses and dogs, I think I would be in Mongolia. I'd probably teach English and maybe learn some Mongolian, be a translator on the trips. If you don't ride horses, by the way, there's no real reason to go to Mongolia, and I say that with so much love for the country. But anyway, please ask me any questions or put some comments in the chat for me. Please let me know your interest level in the January road trip. If it's something that you're not all that interested in, then I won't bother you with helping me with the prep or with checking in. But I think it might be fun to be able to track me as I go. And I would love to stop in and meet anybody, even the usual chatters. Maybe I'm sure we have people out there who don't. I know someone, for example, in Orange County who might want to meet me out at Joshua Tree. And if you'd like to meet me, if you'd like to follow me, if you'd like to lead me, maybe you want to go for a couple days too, that'd be fine. Thanks again. Okay, I have some questions. Awesome. I think I planned my trip to be about, yeah, so how long will my trip be? I'm thinking a month. It depends. I could get a couple hours out of town, and something could go south and I could be back. I could not want to come back for longer than that, but I think a month. Weather dependent, of course. How long I stay at each campground, of course. I really don't know, but I'm guessing that it's a month-long trip. Someone wants to know if I saw a Yeti, and that's my secret. That's my secret, I love. No, but I heard of a yak. I've been asked, yes, I have, I've been asked if I have Byroc's number. I do. It's written, I can't make it out though. I can't make out the digits. But he also wrote me a note, and I don't know what it says. Yeah, can you imagine being a second wife? I already talked about how the women looked older than their years. Like, no, I'm too vain for that. Excellent. Okay, so let me know again how you'd like to help me out on my trip. When you see me going back and forth to the trailer, I'm prepping the trailer. When you see me haul Crow out, I'm prepping Crow. And I'm so excited. So thank you, Suzanne, for letting me use the rig. Thank you, members, for all your support. And thank you for joining me on Fur and Feathers. I welcome anyone to be my guest next week. I will see you Tuesday for Boots on the Ground and the Walkabout. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.